I wrote my first book in second grade. It was a story about two boys named Percival and Archibald, and their journey to winning an ice cream bar for memorizing their multiplication tables. The moment I finished, I walked up to every single kid in my class and asked, "Hey, do you want to read my book?" Every single one of them said no, even the teacher, which, although is odd, makes sense. I mean, writing and publishing and getting people to read your book is honestly pretty hard. And so 11-year-old me went to look up this exact dilemma, and he was left with a couple of answers. Don't even bother, it's a waste of time, focus on your studies, develop your skills, hone your craft, and most common of all, wait until you're older. But here's the problem with waiting. Stories have an expiration date. And while sure, it's always good to wait and develop and hone your craft in any industry ever, the story you write now is completely different than the story you're going to write 10 years in the future, and same for the one you would have written 10 years in the past. And for a teen and someone who's young, as they develop and mature, their story is going to stray farther and farther away from what made it unique and authentic in the first place. I mean, research has shown that adolescents have higher brain plasticity, have higher outputs of creativity, have higher authenticity, and greater amounts of just not caring what other people think. And you can even look at examples outside of just writing as well. I mean, look at Billie Eilish and compare one of her first songs, Oceanized, to one of her more recent ones. And you'll see that they're completely different in content and themes and style. And that's not just because Billie Eilish got better at writing songs and making songs as she wrote more of them. It's because she matured, and she wrote Oceanized when she was 14 years old. And no one would say that Oceanized is a bad song, but as she matured, her songs matured with her. And if you ask anyone, I'm sure they tell you that something like Birds of a Feather would have never been released if not for Oceanized. And here's the thing, what Billie Eilish did at 14 wouldn't have even been close to possible 40, 30, or even 20 years ago. With the newfound introductions of technology, the internet, and countless other tools that I can't even name off the top of my head, every single creative industry is changing. And for teen authors, that means there's three forces that are converging right now to give teen authors and writers the biggest chance they've had to thrive in a long time, or even ever. First is social media, and this one's obvious. It gives you direct audience access to millions, maybe even billions of people, and it allows you to use that community to help shape and refine your book into something that they like and that resonates with their community and into something that you'd see on the shelves. And in just the 2 years that Book Talk, which is TikTok for books, has been relevant in the book and publishing world, it's generated over $2 billion in book sales, and that number has been shown to have been rising exponentially. Second is self-publishing, which wasn't even considered possible 20 years ago. And that was because back then it was a requirement to go through a publisher because there wasn't a way to promote yourself or to market your book or to, say, have the connections necessary to get your book into bookstores or readers' hands. But now with newfound technology and things like social media, like I talked about before, it's now possible to do a lot of the things that publishers and big publishers did in the past by yourself. And even the top CEOs of the biggest publishing houses in the world have admitted that they're not able to make a book with just connections and just money anymore. Every day, publishing becomes more and more focused on your personal brand, your likeness, and what you bring to the table, not just with your book, but also your narrative. And that brings me to the third force, which is youth culture and innovation. And whenever I talk about this, I like to start with a quote, which is that today's youth and the subsequent generations aren't just future consumers, but they're today's tastemakers. Youngest generations are always the ones that are determining how media is adopted, crafted, innovated upon, transformed, adopted, adapted, spread, and basically every task verb you can think of. And because of that, they're able to use it to their advantage, whether that's to identify trends or something that's resonating within their community or just the community as a whole. And even just as an example, if you look at a Wattpad survey that was done with Gen Z and younger readers in a specific town, you can see that 76% of them said that they actively look for books that represent diverse perspectives, and they actively look for books that resonate with them and people around them. And that's completely different from how media was even 10, 20 years ago. And all this goes to show that the way media is being done or anything is changing every single year. And not only are youth the ones who are most on top of that, but they're also the ones that are living it. And here's another thing I noticed. If you look at other creative industries, you can see that teen musicians and child actors are taken way more seriously than teen writers and authors. And this honestly confused me for a while, because just like those industries, there's in the millions of writers out there, maybe a couple dozen thousand that are teenagers, there has to be talent that's at least equal to, or maybe even better than some of the best sellers on the shelves right now. And that's not just a guess on my part. Christopher Paolini published Aragon at 17. It's become a staple of the fantasy genre. S.E. Hinton published The Outsiders, which I'm sure you've all read in your English class in her late teens. Nancy Fawn published Swordbird at 13, and that's become a classic. And Lauren Roberts, who's an author who published in the last 3 years, self-published Fearless at 19. And it's become it started one of the biggest trends you've seen in books in the last 5 years. And so the question is, why are teen authors not being taken seriously? What's stopping them from thriving and flourishing at the level that they should be? Well, I've boiled it down to two problems. First is the credibility bias. This is what I was talking about earlier, the idea that teens have to wait and develop and hone their skills for 30 plus years before they even think about publishing their first book, because otherwise it's a waste of time and they could be focusing on their studies or something that's more important. Not only, like I said earlier, does this mindset kind of dilute the authentic voice that a lot of these teens have and what made their story unique in the first place, and not only does it assume that the only good books are non-commercial literary fictions that are written by people with 30 years of life experience and win Pulitzer Prizes, but it also just demotivates an entire generation of writers. I mean, there's a reason why only 0.02% of writers who write in adolescence continue on into adulthood, even if that's just for fun. The second problem is just a lack of infrastructure. I mean, even full adult authors and full bestsellers have agents who are cheering them on and guiding them through the whole process. And they have editors who are helping pinpoint their weaknesses and develop their voice. And if you think about it, teens need these kinds of resources more than adults do. And the only way they can really get those kinds of resources, maybe their creative writing club, and if we're being honest, those are underfunded as well. And so you may be asking, what can happen when these problems are overcome? Are there any success stories? And I mean, of course there are, otherwise I wouldn't be giving this talk. And I've talked about the 3 authors beforehand, and there's one that I didn't mention, and that's on purpose, and that's Lauren Roberts. And that's because her book Fearless succeeded because she used 2 of the forces that I talked about earlier. But prior to even starting writing her book, she built a community on Book Talk, and she used that community of millions to help shape and refine her book to something that resonated with the masses. And Lauren Roberts was a young, avid reader herself, and because of that, she was able to identify romantasy as a rising trend in the book world, and she was able to see that it resonated with her community and the community as a whole. And just by hopping on that romantasy train, which, by the way, was word of the year at some point, which I think is crazy, but just by hopping on that train, her book has become one of the staples of that genre, and it's one of the first books you think of. And in terms of infrastructure, there's also been examples of that to pretty wild degrees of success. First, I'd like to talk about Novelly, which provides these kind of agents and editors to teen writers and authors to help them through the entire process. And not only have they do they have an entire catalog of dozens of teen-written books, but they've also gotten their books in schools across the world, and they've gotten hundreds of thousands of dollars in funding and thousands of reads. And then there's TeenScript, which is something I started on this exact thought process, that teen writers have so much more potential to thrive if they're given resources and support. And in just the 6 months that we've existed, and we do something similar in Novelly, where we provide agential and editorial and a bit of structure to help teen writers support. One of our authors was struggling to write her first draft for over 2 years and was about to give up because of the reasons I mentioned before. And with just a bit of feedback and a bit of structure and a little bit of a push and some feedback here and there, she was able to finish her first draft in just 1 summer, 2 months even, and her book's scheduled for an upcoming release this May. And all this goes to show that teen writers and authors do have the potential to be taken seriously, to reach heights that no one's ever seen before, but combined with dissenting voices from people around them and just a lack of resources, that all culminates into this kind of self-inhibiting self-doubt that puts them and the entire industry as a whole into a box. They're not able to reach that level, and they're not able to flourish at that same height. And here's the thing. Everything I've talked about up to now can be applied to every single creative field with even just a smidge of creativity. I mean, we've talked about music and we've talked about theater, but there's also things like film, and there's fashion, and there's science, chemistry, physics. And the thing is, in today's world where we have newfound trends regarding technology, and we have the internet, and we have all these different things to help us do a lot of the things by ourselves that in the past big publishers or big record labels or big fashion companies did, We're not able to do all of that ourselves, and because of that, there's no reason to continue on waiting. And so here's what I have to say. To the experienced people, the people at the top of their industry that have been doing this kind of thing for a while, the founders, the CEOs, all those kinds of people, pass the mic a little bit. Give a little bit of feedback to those younger than you or those with less experience, and even if you think their ideas are stupid or that your time would be better spent focusing on your own craft and honing your own craft, you never know whether that stupid idea may be a breakthrough. And who knows, maybe you'll get some experience from the person with no experience that will help you with your own craft. And to those young people, the people my age, the people that have no experience and really should be spending their time studying, what I have to say is just stop waiting and go. I mean, you've heard my talk up to now, and even if your voice doesn't reach the same heights as Mary Shelley or S.E. Hinton, your voice still matters, and there's still countless benefits to publishing a book or doing any sort of long-term creative project, like project management and risk-taking, just to name a few. And who knows, maybe you are a genius. Thank you.